Rio de Janeiro, Brazil is going to be the host of the 2016 Olympic Games, and in order to do so, they have to put in place some evictions, forced evictions. We're talking about almost 400 families that were forced out of their homes because the municipal authorities decided that they needed to clear out the way to create a new high-speed bus that goes from the airport to Barra de Tijuca. Barra de Tijuca is the neighborhood where most of the events of the Olympic Games will happen, Nick, and what we're seeing is really, really sad. We're talking about almost 23,000 families that will be evicted, and the evictions started in 2009. And we've seen systemically all this push of these poor people, mainly poor people, that is being kicked out of urban areas into the outskirts of the city, sometimes up to 60 miles away from places that they have been living for 70, 75 years. And some activists are claiming that all of this is actually a segregation plan to put the poor people outside of the urban areas and leave the rich people to develop the downtown of Barra de Tijuca and Rio de Janeiro for profit.
Wow, that's just ridiculous that they're not even resettling them in the same city, basically. We're talking a completely different place. What if you have a job in a certain place that you need to be to every day, and now all of a sudden you're moved 60 miles away? Now, we saw the same thing also. We saw protests very similar to these during the World Cup as well.
Yes, the soccer.
Yeah, it pisses a lot of people out. Unfortunately, though, we're going to jump on Brazil's back over this issue, but it happens all over the place, and it happens everywhere, and we see it. It's rampant. It's something that just seems to be natural to humans. I mean,
to Olympic Games, because it happens. It happened in every time there's Olympic Games or a soccer World Cup. These displacements of people, of poor populations happen, and I think that it's important to understand that just last week, in one of these evictions, 344 families decided to fight back, and pretty much a battle ensued, and there was victims, and people got hurt and ended up in the hospital because they were defending and saying, no, we're not going to get moved for you to build, infrastructure for the rich people, and us, you're just kicking us out of the cities to places, like you mentioned, they have very little connection. They have very little bus lines that connect them to the urban centers, and many of these citizens have found themselves having to break the law, the zoning laws. Because in Brazil, there's some zoning laws where they say that you can establish a work of an office in your home. So now they are forced to break those laws because they don't have ways to connect to their old jobs and go to their previous centers of labor, and they have to work from home. And now, there's been some research that looks specifically into the relation of being displaced and mental health and the lack of opportunity, and they've seen that many of these families have been affected deeply to the point where they have 2 or 3 years of unemployment because of the displacement.
What it seems to me is that the Brazilian government is, in a way, criminalizing being poor. And they're setting these laws in place that will screw you over if you don't live in a certain place, if you don't make a certain amount of money, if you don't have the right job. Those are the people that get screwed over the most all the time. And we see the same thing in the U.S. Although it's not institutionalized the way it is in Brazil, here in the U.S. we see major real estate developers. For example, here, I'm just going to talk about LA because this is where we're at. If you look downtown, you see these huge real estate investors who buy these buildings, put security guards on the premises, and now what used to be a dump where a bunch of homeless people were living, you see this high rise with security guards kicking people out, pushing them out. Venice Beach, Snapchat, big companies like this, these developers come in and they buy, Snapchat literally bought a youth homeless center in Venice, and then the same thing, they put security guards around there. It's gentrification.
Exactly, and what they're seeing is really, really, really dangerous. The program, the social program from Brazil is called Minha Casa, Minha Vida, that translates to My House, My Life. And the program basically relocates these families and they send them to social development that pretty much are favelas sanctioned by the government. But the problem is that because of the corruption and the criminal levels, we see that these favelas are being run by illicit militias that are charging the people to be protected. So you're sending these people from homes that they've been living for in 75 years. And then they go 60 miles out of the city. They're completely disconnected of their communities. And now they have to face with corruption and crime, all for us to have a great Olympic game next year in 2016. Let us know your thoughts. Are Olympic Games worth putting people out of their homes? Let us know, and please subscribe to the Lib TV 2.